Welcome to the Explainer. Consider this your ultimate cheat sheet to understanding exactly how our brains actually acquire new skills and process the world. Have you ever wondered how you adapt to completely unknown situations? Well, today we are breaking down the actual mechanics of learning and how we measure true intelligence. Basically, we're going to explore the software you install into your brain and the actual hardware that runs the whole shebang.
To keep things organized, here is our mental map for today. We'll start with the mechanics of learning, followed by the 6 ways we learn. Then we'll move on to decoding true intelligence, compare IQ versus EQ, and finish up with the quick revision.
Okay, let's dive into part 1, the mechanics of learning, or upgrading your mental software.
Now, when we say the word learning, we aren't just talking about, sitting at a desk in a classroom. Learning is actually defined as a relatively permanent change in behavior or knowledge that happens as a result of experience, practice, or training. It's this constant, highly active transformation. Like, think about studying complex accounting concepts. You don't just magically absorb them. You learn by studying and solving practical questions over and over until that knowledge is literally installed in your brain permanently.
And honestly, it brilliantly distills down into this one super simple formula. Experience plus practice leads to learning, which ultimately results in change. Without the experience and the practice, no real learning happens. And without a noticeable change, well, nothing was actually learned in the first place.
So, learning definitely isn't a temporary state like just being tired or hungry. It's a continuous, lifelong process based entirely on your experiences. It brings about real behavioral change, and it sticks with you. It's relatively permanent. It's incredibly goal-oriented too. And actually, a really fascinating point here, it can be positive or negative. You can learn bad habits just as easily as good ones, right? It's totally different for every single person, and it absolutely demands active practice.
To help you effortlessly encode those academic terms into your memory, I want to share this fantastic little mnemonic hack. Just remember, every experience brings lasting goals, making learning different. It perfectly anchors everything we just covered. Experience, behavioral change, lasting, goal-oriented, and differing by person. It's just a great way to lock those concepts in.
All right, moving right along to Section 2, 6 Ways We Learn, the varied paths to acquiring knowledge.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the huge variety in how our brains actually take in the world. Look at the contrast here. You've got cognitive learning, which is the sheer mental gymnastics of thinking and reasoning, like our accounting example earlier. But contrast that with motor learning. That's purely physical, like figuring out the exact swing to play badminton. Then we've got verbal learning for words and concept learning for broad ideas, like understanding what an asset fundamentally is. We also use social learning, which is just absorbing information by observing a senior colleague around the workplace. And finally, conditioning. This is learning through association and rewards. Think Ivan Pavlov's dogs or B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning.
Which brings us to Section 3, decoding true intelligence and understanding our mental hardware.
We've talked a whole lot about the software data we input. Now let's look at the processing power itself. It is absolutely crucial to note that true intelligence is way more than just getting an A on a test. Intelligence is formally defined as the ability to understand, think, learn, reason, solve problems, and adapt to totally new situations. It's a multifaceted toolkit. Whether you're untangling complicated financial concepts or figuring out how to navigate a completely foreign city, you're using your intelligence.
We usually break this hardware down into 3 main buckets. Abstract intelligence is your capacity to handle ideas, symbols, and numbers, like solving a high-level math problem. Concrete intelligence is your practical side, dealing with physical objects and situations, like operating heavy machinery. And then there's social intelligence, which is the wildly complex ability to understand and effectively interact with people, like handling a tense dispute in the office without it blowing up.
But psychologist Howard Gardner took this a step further and basically blew up the traditional definition of smartness. He proposed multiple intelligences, breaking it all the way down into 8 distinct categories. You could be brilliant linguistically with words, or logical mathematically with numbers. You might excel spatially or musically. Then there's bodily kinesthetic for movement, interpersonal for reading others, intrapersonal for deeply knowing yourself, and naturalistic for understanding living things.
Okay, I know. That is a lot to remember. So let's slow down the pace for a second. Here is a super punchy rhythmic trick to memorize Gardner's entire theory instantly. Say it with me. Language, logic, space, music, body, people,
self, nature. If you can just recall that short sequence, you have all 8 intelligences completely locked in.
So, how in the world do we measure this hardware? Well, historically, cognitive ability was calculated using the good old intelligence quotient, or IQ. The exact math was pretty straightforward. You take a person's mental age, divide it by their chronological age, and multiply by 100. So, say a 10-year-old child had the reasoning skills of a 12-year-old. You do 12 divided by 10 times 100, and boom, an IQ of 120. Now, modern IQ tests definitely use much more complex, standardized scoring today, but this gives you a great idea of how we historically measured pure brain power.
And that sets us up perfectly for Section 4, IQ versus EQ, the head versus the heart. Because here's the reality, raw brain power is not everything. Enter EQ, or emotional quotient. This is your ability to recognize, manage, and use emotions. It's built on self-awareness, self-management, motivation, empathy, and social skills. I mean, we've all met incredibly smart people who just really struggle in life, right? They might be able to code brilliant software from scratch, but they completely fall apart because they can't manage their own frustrations or empathize with a coworker.
Let's move to this and see how this builds. Systematically comparing the two, IQ is focused entirely on the intellectual mind. It's amazing for academic, analytical tasks like crushing a numerical problem. EQ, however, is all about emotions and relationships. It is absolutely vital for communication. It's the difference between knowing the facts and being able to take harsh criticism calmly without flying off the handle.
So it literally boils down to this stark contrast. IQ means you think smart, EQ means you handle emotions. You could honestly be a genius who solves complex quantum physics equations, but if your EQ is rock bottom, you might completely lose your mind and throw a tantrum just because someone cut you off in traffic.
So the crucial point is this. When you are staring down a challenge, your IQ asks, can I solve it? But your EQ asks, can I handle it? These two contrasting questions are the absolute core takeaway of the entire IQ versus EQ debate. You really, truly need both.
Let's bring it all home with Section 5, Quick Revision, Cementing the Knowledge. We covered a ton of ground in this explainer today. Quick recap on the software side: learning is active, it's goal-oriented, and it's a continuous experience-based change. And remember, it takes place across those 6 distinct types: cognitive, motor, verbal, concept, social, and conditioning.
On the hardware side, our intelligence is our overall ability to adapt and solve problems. It comes in a bunch of forms: abstract, concrete, social, and Gardner's 8 multiple intelligences. Ranging from musical flair to logical reasoning, it's all about balancing our raw intellect with emotional management.
If you take away absolutely nothing else from our time together today, please remember this quote. It perfectly captures everything we just talked about. IQ helps you solve the problem. EQ helps you handle yourself and others while solving it.
And so I'm going to leave you with this provocative final thought. If you can solve literally any problem in the world, but you cannot handle yourself or the people around you, are you truly intelligent? Think about your own balance of IQ and EQ today. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep upgrading that mental software.